28 years later has been out for almost a week now, and there are a few things that have been simmering away in my mind since I first watched it. Now that I've had a bit of time to think about them, it's clear to see that this definitely wasn't close to being the perfect continuation of the series in the slightest. This movie had its flaws, and there were a few major ones that I thought were worth shining a light on. So with that, let's dive into this video and discuss the biggest issues within 28 years later. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Spike should never have left the island with his mother. For me, one of the biggest issues with this entire movie is built upon the fact that a large part of the story should never have actually happened. For example, the whole first third of the movie was about watching Spike going out with his father for the first time to the mainland and aiming to get his first kill of an infected. This is exactly what we saw happen, and whilst they were on the mainland, we were deliberately made to see that it wasn't a safe place to be, that Spike was way out of his depth, and that there was genuinely a threat around every corner. This was shown to us as there were a few times where both Spike and his father came close to being caught and infected. First by the small fat ones, secondly by the regular infected when they went into the farmhouse, and thirdly when the alpha was a mere arm's reach away from them whilst they were at the gate to hoe the island. What they went through would be enough to scare a grown man that had never been off the island before, let alone a 12-year-old boy that had only known the island that he was raised on. As well as that, add in the fact that Spike's father told him about Dr. Kelson and the story that around 15 years ago he saw the doctor carrying dead bodies, laying them all out in a single file way, and that he waved with a smile and called him over. That story would be just as nightmare-inducing as what running away from the infected would have been, and you'd want to steer clear from him. Dr. Kelson was painted out to be a deranged man that could have quite literally been responsible for all of the dead that were in front of him in that story. And the haunting smile was something that should have been a red flag that made Spike never actually want to find him. However, probably my biggest issue is the fact that Spike, a 12-year-old boy, disregarded everything that he went through that day when he was off the island, and also he didn't listen to the story about the doctor that could have quite literally been a mass murderer. And instead, he decided to sneak his mother out, who he saw was extremely sick and couldn't really even be looked after by adults, and then take her to the mainland with the hope of finding this doctor, all whilst needing to avoid the infected and the alphas that were standing in his way. I just didn't buy into the fact that within his mind he'd come to that conclusion and ultimately made that decision. Yeah, he cared deeply about his mother, hated the fact that she was wasting away in the bedroom and was showing no signs of getting better, so he obviously wanted to find out what was wrong with her. Plus, he also hated the fact that he felt like everybody on the island, even his father, was lying to him, especially when it came to being unfaithful to his mother, and it almost seemed like she was being forgotten about. But I just don't feel like he was ever in the right headspace to want to just leave the island after everything that he went through. You don't go through all of that and then think, I know what I'll do, I'll take my extremely confused mother off the island to find this doctor that could be a mass murderer. Where's the logic in that? So for me, it should never have happened, which would ultimately make the entire movie that we saw redundant. He should have been petrified to go outside of those gates again. So that stood out to me for being a bit of a strange inclusion in the movie. Who was the villain? Whilst the infected are a key part of these movies because they're ultimately the villains, when looking at both 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, the infected are almost used as a catalyst for a wider purpose and a deeper meaning. In 28 Days Later, through the use of Major Henry West, we saw how humans were actually just as dangerous as the infected that were on the other side of the wall. This was because he used kindness to lure people into a false sense of safety and then actually planned on exploiting the women and killing the men, showing that there was truly no safe haven in any of this apocalyptic world that they found themselves in. Then, in 28 Weeks Later, we saw the kill or be killed mindset that the Americans had when it came to wiping out all of the people that were within the city to contain the spread, and how Andy and Tammy were relying on the kindness of the odd person, something that was hard to come by in order to survive. Within 28 years later, I didn't really see that magnification on a specific thing that either made the villain be something completely different other than the infected, or it actually feel like the movie had a deeper purpose behind it, other than showing that there was a lack of progression and people were just stuck mourning the world before. I'd even say my issue with the infected being the villain in this movie was that they didn't actually feel as menacing, haunting, and petrifying as what they did in the original movie. The blood red eyes weren't really there as much, and there was never a true herd of them, just the odd few running down the hill. Granted, the Alpha was a beast in the way that he acted with the ripping off of the head and leaving the spine attached. But if he was actually the main villain in the movie, then I feel like that's a bit of an issue, because the only time there was a real threat was when Spike and Isla got off the bus, and also when Spike and his father tried to get back in. So it just didn't quite do it for me. Maybe if we're looking at it from more of a trilogy perspective, Jimmy might end up being a villain of some kind. And with us also seeing signs of him potentially torturing infected or people before they turn, there could be a dark side on the horizon. But until the next movie comes out, I can't truly be the judge of that. The ending. There's no way Spike would survive. The final major issue that I'll touch upon with this movie is the fact that the ending just felt a bit bizarre and out of place. Spike obviously went on this journey of understanding that there needed to be some form of progression in life, otherwise the island would just be stuck mourning the life that they once lived forever. A life that he didn't even really know about because he wasn't alive during the before time. But for him to learn all about Memento Mori and Memento Amoris and then just leave everybody behind back home and also his father as well, it was a decision that was just as strange as what it was for him to initially decide to leave the island with his mother during the beginning. Spike hadn't truly shown any signs of being able to fend for himself, as even when he evaded the Alpha on the abandoned train, he was saved by the Doctor. Without him, like without the Watchers at the top of the tower and his father during the beginning, he'd have been a goner. So the whole idea of him feeling like he could just fend for himself, fight off any infected that came his way and live off the land, hoping to explore and find other survivors that were out there, just felt like a bit of an extreme decision that didn't actually have that much thought and logic behind it. He even had a basket of a handful of arrows that he was using to hunt as well as fight. So once they ran out, what would he even do then? Plus, right at the end, just on cue, we obviously saw that he was saved yet again by Jimmy, the character that had now grown up from the start of the movie and the cult that he'd built up over the years. So it didn't quite feel like an appropriate way for the movie to end. I get that he wanted to go out and explore and find what other ways of life were able to be lived out there, but at the same time, this kid is 12 years old and he showed no signs of being able to survive. So I thought it was just all a little bit strange and it didn't quite work for me. With 28 Years Later being the third installment in the series of movies, but the first in this new trilogy, I do think it falls short when compared to the first two. It just lacked that powerful message that the likes of 28 Days Later had. It lacked the characters to fully get behind and feel invested in. And it also lacked an ending that carried weight, meaning, and power. So I think it's a real shame. I did enjoy watching parts of the movie when it was on, and I actually feel like the second movie has the potential to be better than this one because we'll be able to explore more of the world, rather than the short view from the top of the hill. So here's to hoping that the next one will resemble what made the first one so good, and the second one a pretty solid sequel that has only got better with time. So, there you have it, the biggest issues with 28 Years Later. If you want to see a full breakdown of 28 Years Later, or all of the new species of infected being explained, then check the videos below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.